Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India NewsHour, India's voice to the world. I'm Amritpal Singh. Coming up in the next 1 hour, Prime Minister Narendra Modi leads the nation in celebrating the 78th Independence Day from the historic Red Fort in New Delhi, makes a pitch for uniform civil code, emphasizes bringing one nation, one election in the country. Prime Minister Modi outlines the goal of a developed India by 2047, expresses concern about the safety of Hindus and other minorities in Bangladesh, stresses on the need to widely publicize punishments given for atrocities against women. Wishes pour in from across the world for India's Independence Day. World leaders including Russian President Putin, French President Emmanuel Macron, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Prime Ministers of UAE, Nepal and the Maldives extend their greetings. New rounds of Gaza ceasefire talks get underway in Doha. Israel spy chiefs of US and Egypt hold closed-door talks with Qatar's Prime Minister. Russia declares a federal-level emergency in Belgorod. Ukraine claims to capture Russian settlements. Russia takes control of Ivanivka village in Ukraine's Donetsk region. Prime Minister Narendra Modi underscored the imperative of implementing key reforms towards making India a developed country by 2047, inspired by the legacy of India's freedom struggle. Speaking from the historic Red Fort in New Delhi, he presented a compelling call for a secular, uniform civil code, one nation, one election, and opening the doors for youth in Indian politics. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay reports.
On the occasion of India's 78th Independence Day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi unfurled the national flag at Red Fort in Delhi for the 11th consecutive time. Prime Minister received Rashtriya Salute from Punjab Regiment Military Band. PM also inspected the Guard of Honour, which consisted of 1 officer and 24 personnel, each from Army, Air Force and Delhi Police. Addressing the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister recalled the sacrifices people made for the nation. He touched upon many issues of national importance in his nearly 100-minute speech. PM took a strong exception to crime and violence against women in the backdrop of widespread protests across the nation against West Bengal's horrific rape and murder case.
Employment हो, entrepreneurship हो, हर सेक्टर में महिलाओं के कदम बढ़ते जा रहे हैं, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ कुछ चिंता की बातें भी आती हैं कि हमारी माताओं, बहनों, बेटियों के प्रति जो अत्याचार हो रहे हैं, उसके प्रति देश का आक्रोश है। इस आक्रोश को मैं महसूस कर रहा हूं। इसको देश को, समाज को, हमारी राज्य सरकारों को गंभीरता से लेना होगा। महिलाओं के विरुद्ध अपराधों की जल्द से जल्द जांच हो, राक्षसी कृत्य करने वालों को जल्द से जल्द कड़ी सजा हो, वो समाज में विश्वास पैदा करने के लिए जरूरी है।
Prime Minister assured that the government's commitment to economic reform is unshakable. He also made a strong pitch for uniform civil code.
जो कानून धर्म के आधार पर देश को बांटते हैं, जो ऊंच नीच का कारण बन जाते हैं, ऐसे कानूनों को आधुनिक समाज में कोई स्थान नहीं हो सकता है। और इसलिए मैं तो कहूंगा, अब समय की मांग है कि देश में एक सेकुलर सिविल कोड हो। हमने कम्युनल सिविल कोड में 75 साल बिताए हैं, अब हमें सेक्युलर सिविल कोड की तरफ जाना होगा और तब जाकर के देश में धर्म के आधार पर जो भेदभाव हो रहे हैं, सामान्य नागरिक को जो दूरी महसूस होती है, उससे हमें मुक्ति मिलेगी।
PM mentioned the crisis in Bangladesh. He said India remains concerned about safety of Hindus and other minorities in Bangladesh.
140 करोड़ देशवासियों की चिंता कि वहां हिंदू, वहां के अल्पसंख्यक, उस समुदाय की सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित हो। भारत हमेशा चाहता है कि हमारे पड़ोसी देश सुख और शांति के मार्ग पर चले। शांति के प्रति हमारा कमिटमेंट है, हमारे संस्कार है। हम आने वाले दिनों में बांग्लादेश की विकास यात्रा में हमेशा हमारा शुभचिंतन ही रहेगा।
Concluding his speech, Prime Minister acknowledged the greetings of people gathered at the Red Fort. Crowds were seen jostling with one another to shake hands with Prime Minister and take selfies with him. PM also went to the enclosure where school children were present and acknowledged their love and affection. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
And Prime Minister Modi also said that his government wants to build an education system in the country where the youngsters need not go abroad for studies. Prime Minister also said that the government wants more foreign students to come into India and study.
Today, through the new education policy, Government of India wants to transform the current education system in line with requirements of the 21st century, says Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the ramparts of Red Fort on the occasion of 78th Independence Day. He emphasized on preparing future-ready skilled resources in India and also to create such institutions that attract people from abroad to come to Bharat instead.
हमें शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में फिर से एक बार सदियों पुराने उस नालंदा स्पिरिट को जगाना होगा, उस नालंदा स्पिरिट को जीना होगा, उस नालंदा स्पिरिट को लेकर के बड़े विश्वास के साथ विश्व की ज्ञान की परंपराओं को नई चेतना देने का काम हमें करना होगा.
Prime Minister outlines India's commitment to become global leader in semiconductor production, aiming to reduce dependency on imports and enhance technological self-sufficiency.
भारत अपनी बेस्ट क्वालिटी के लिए पहचानी जाए, ये बहुत जरूरी है. हमारे पास टैलेंट है. डिजाइन के क्षेत्र में हम दुनिया को बहुत कुछ नया दे सकते हैं. डिजाइन इन इंडिया, इस आह्वान को लेकर के हमें अब आगे चलना है. डिजाइन इन इंडिया एंड डिजाइन फॉर द वर्ल्ड, इस सपने को लेकर के चलना है.
Prime Minister emphasized the importance of green jobs in India's efforts to combat climate change.
तो हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन मिशन लेकर के एक ग्लोबल हब बनना चाहते हैं. बहुत तेजी से नीतियां बनाई गई है, बहुत तेजी से उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन का काम हो रहा है और भारत ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन एक न्यू एनर्जी की दिशा में हम जाना चाहते हैं. और ये सारे जो प्रयास चल रहे हैं, क्लाइमेट की चिंता तो है ही है, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग की चिंता है, लेकिन इसके अंदर ग्रीन जॉब्स की बहुत बड़ी संभावना है.
Prime Minister spoke on India's aspiration to be recognized for its commitment to quality, stating that Indian standards should aspire to become international benchmarks. Bureau Report, DD India.
And as India celebrates its 78th Independence Day, the world leaders extended their best wishes to the country and its people. Indian missions around the globe also marked the occasion with great enthusiasm. Our next report by DD India's Mihir Maihuri provides an in-depth look at the global celebrations. Take a listen.
As the world's largest democracy celebrated its 78th Independence Day on Thursday, leaders from around the globe also joined in the celebrations by sending their best wishes. Keeping up with the social media buzz, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni extended her greetings to Indians with a photo of herself and Prime Minister Modi. She highlighted the ever stronger bond between India and Italy and expressed confidence that together they will achieve great things. Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated India and stated that Russia attaches great importance to the privileged strategic partnership with India. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken congratulated India and celebrated its rich and diverse history, while expressing optimism for the future of US-India relations. French President Emmanuel Macron congratulated India and reminisced about his visit in January this year. He expressed eagerness to work with India's Prime Minister Modi to achieve mutual goals. Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum extended his greetings to India and stated that the UAE remains dedicated to reinforcing the friendship between the two countries. Maldivian President Dr. Mohammad Muizzu also extended his wishes, stating that the enduring friendship between India and the Maldives, rooted in history, has evolved to foster prosperity and development in the region. Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jagannath greeted India and praised the enduring and vibrant relationship between Mauritius and Bharat. Bhutanese Prime Minister Shering Tobgay extended his wishes, expressing his hope that the special friendship between India and Bhutan continues to grow even stronger. Nepalese Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli also extended his wishes, expressing hope that this day will strengthen the bonds of friendship and cooperation between India and Nepal. Indian missions worldwide celebrated Independence Day with great fervor. In Moscow, Washington DC, Paris, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Kathmandu, Beijing, and Tokyo, Indian embassies held flag-hoisting ceremonies attended by the jubilant Indian community, who also performed cultural performances. At London's iconic India House, the tricolour was hoisted amidst a sea of Indian diaspora. Mihir Makri's report for DD India.
And the Indian Embassy in Bahrain celebrated India's 78th Independence Day with a gathering of over 800 members of the Indian community, with a flag-hoisting ceremony presided over by Indian Ambassador to Bahrain Vinod K. Jacob. The ambassador offered tributes to Mahatma Gandhi and highlighted the country's achievements and future goals. A photo exhibition displaying key moments of the Kargil War and a plantation of a neem sapling were also part of the celebrations. And on the occasion of the India Independence Day, Indian Ambassador to UAE Sanjay Sudhir highlighted strengthening the ties between India and the United Arab Emirates.
Largest economy in the world, and we should become the fourth largest by the end of 2025. For the last 10 years, India has been among the top 3 fastest growing major economies in the world. In that sense, India is that shining star, I would say, on the global economic firmament. India-UAE relations have undergone a major transformation in the last 10 years. My message to the Indian community is just to recognize the big contribution they have played in the socio-economic development of the UAE, as well as strengthening India-UAE relationship.
UAE Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence also lauded the bilateral ties between India and the UAE.
Our two countries share much in common. Both countries understand and agree that we should do all we can to strengthen our joint political, economic, commercial, and cultural relations. And just as India has long promoted creativity, innovation, and human and economic development in its own country, the leadership of our President is solidifying our position in the UAE as a major center for those activities as well.
And as part of India's Independence Day celebrations, the cultural wing of the High Commission of India in Sri Lanka, that's the Swami Vivekanand Cultural Centre, organized the Bharat-Sri Lanka Maitri Utsav. The festival, which was inaugurated on Thursday evening at the Independence Square in Colombo, is being observed as a vibrant carnival of friendship between the two countries. The 4-day-long event is featuring a handicraft fair, a food festival and cultural performances. And to talk more about the Prime Minister's speech at the Red Fort today on the occasion of the 78th Independence Day, I'm joined by Professor Harshvardhan Pant. He's Vice President of the ORF. Thank you, Professor Pant, for joining me on the show. What do you make of the speech? Because the speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort is basically what the Prime Minister's government did over the past it's up to the Prime Minister, 1 year, 10 years, for however long continuously he has been in power, and what his vision was. So on that account, how do you rate the Prime Minister's speech? What were the key points that struck you?
One of the things that was quite striking was the note of continuity. The sense that the last decade had been a decade of transformation, which indeed in so many ways it has been, and I think taking that foundation forward over the next few years, I think this was a roadmap that he was laying out for the future of India in some ways. That look, the government has done this over the last decade, and it plans to do even more in those areas which are going to define perhaps India's growth trajectory, as well as the critical nodes in the global economic and political architecture. So in that sense, positioning India as one of the key nodal actors, I think that was the message that you got, that here the government of India is very confident of India playing that central role on the basis of what has been done over the last decade and on the policies that I think the government now wants to implement. So I think in that sense, a very forward-looking speech, a speech that used the last decade, as a launching pad to define how India will engage not only its own population, not only its own populace, but also the world at that level. So I do think that it is quite central in that sense that the Prime Minister often does that in his speeches. He defines the terms of engagement, and he defines the long-term vision that he has, which I think he clearly articulated. So I think what struck, what often is now striking in his speeches is how deep down policy level he goes into. Often in the past, we have seen speeches which are very generic in that sense. I think in this speech, we saw him going very specific into certain areas that he feels are going to be critical, whether technology, whether climate, whether youth, and whether women. I think those areas which he feels very, very deeply about, he was laying the, in some ways, the policy landscape for them, for the people to understand where he wants to take India. And I think in that sense, where he wants to position India as an actor.
Okay, exactly. As you said, Professor Pant, that the Prime Minister speaks both to his citizens, the citizens of his country from the Red Fort, and he also addresses the world. Let's first talk about, what was the message that he was trying to send to the world. When he said, when he outlined the contours of how he wishes to achieve developed India by 2047, a Viksit Bharat, and therefore he sees, ease of living mission. He spoke about made in India, chip semiconductor production, industrial manufacturing, design in India, design for the world. What was he telling the world?
He was telling the world in a sense that, look, India is going to be building its capacities over the next few years. India is going to be focused on building its own strengths. But India is also going to be a country that is not going to let up its global responsibilities. We live in a moment where most countries, and in fact, the bigger the country is, the more inward-looking that country is becoming. You look at the debates in the US and Europe. These are countries that used to take the lead in shaping global discourse. Today, these countries are so focused on matching their internal turbulence that I think for a country like India that now sees itself as the global leader, the message from the Prime Minister was categorical that even as India will build its own strength, even as India is going to build its own capacities, India is going to do it for both its own people, its own citizens, but also for the global good. And I think that's what he meant, that, when he said design in India, but design for the world, make in India, but also make for the world. In that sense, the commitment is that we are going to be a very globally engaged country. We are not going to dissociate ourselves from the world, but we have to also focus on building our own capacities in critical areas, semiconductors, chips, technology, where India needs to be self-reliant. So self-reliance does not mean inward orientation for India. It means even greater engagement with the world.
Okay. Bangladesh figured in his speech today, where he said, he talked about being a partner in the Vikas Yatra or the development journey of Bangladesh, but he stressed upon the safety, the concerns about safety of Hindus and other minorities in Bangladesh. What was he telling the interim government there?
Look, I think what Prime Minister was certainly, he has done this repeatedly. He has mentioned it when he first congratulated the interim leader of Bangladesh. Even then he had said that he hopes that the normalcy will return soon and also minorities will be protected. So I think what in a sense he's saying that India-Bangladesh relationship, or no relationship for that matter, can be a one-way street. That if you have, if you have minorities, they need to be protected according to the rules of the state. If you have, if you have rules and regulations that they need to be applied equally to all, and you can't, you can't have an India-Bangladesh relationship which is devoid of the larger socio-economic context. And in this case, the relationship of the new government with India will also be contingent upon how that government deals with the minorities and their challenges, because this is a very critical moment in Bangladesh, and this is a very critical moment for the minorities in Bangladesh. So I think unless India and Indians see some change there in terms of what has been happening over the last few days, unless we see a movement, positive movement, it will be very difficult for any government in India to ensure that India-Bangladesh ties, important as they are, and howsoever India may want to be part of the developmental journey, any Indian government would find it very difficult to engage with that government. And I think that message has been loud and clear. And perhaps that's the reason why we have also seen some changes over the last few days in the way Bangladesh, the interim government, has approached this issue. So I do hope that that message goes out quite categorically in Bangladesh and elsewhere as well.
Okay, let's come to the domestic front. UCC, or the Uniform Civil Code, is the need of the hour. The Prime Minister says a large section of the country believes, and he says it's true, that the civil code that we are living with is actually a communal civil code in a way. I would say there is the need of the hour is to have a secular civil code in the country. Only then would we be free of discrimination and on the basis of religion. The opinion on that is quite divided. It is a divisive issue in Indian politics. Why did the Prime Minister choose his Independence Day speech to bring this up?
See, I think partly because Prime Minister has been talking about related issues for a while. You would recall he had talked about the rights of Muslim women for quite some time. And therefore, he introduced certain changes. His government introduced some major changes. And therefore, he has been talking about this issue, this particular issue, this sense that uniformity in laws is the need of the hour. Uniform civil code is the need of the hour. But I think what he is very, very smartly done is to now lob this ball in the opposition's camp, because he has by defining it as a secular code, he's also now asking the opposition to step up to what they believe in. This whole logic that we are a great secular nation, and that is a term that often has been abused so often that it has lost its meaning. But now I think what he's trying to tell the opposition that, look, if you believe in secularism, then it implies that we have secular code across the world. We can't have these civil codes which are discriminatory in nature, which are inherently against the spirit of the Constitution. So in some ways he has not only redefined the debate itself, but he has also now put the onus on the opposition to come back on this issue, because as you say, it's a highly divisive issue. It's an issue on which the opposition feels, certain parts of the opposition feel very strongly about, and they will push back. But I think what he has done is, by defining it not as uniform, but as secular code, he's also making a case that if you believe in secularism, true secularism, then I think the issue, the civil code issue, needs to be looked at through that prism. And if you look at it through that prism, the debate becomes much more, much easier to navigate and negotiate.
Okay. He attacked the opposition, Professor Pant. Some would argue that was Red Fort the right forum to attack the opposition, where he said that some people cannot tolerate the progress. There is unified resolution on that. Some people want anarchy. and the country needs to protect itself from these handful of pessimistic people?
Well, I think that's, it can be a question of perspectives as to how particular debates and how certain issues around the debate are, for any leader, how do you define the issues that are relevant? But I think in some ways, for a leader of a country, when he or she addresses the citizens at this scale, it is important to ensure that pessimism that may exist in certain quarters does not percolate down to the societal level. And I think it is important for a leader of a country like India to push back against pessimism. And also, let's remember, we are living in very volatile times. If you look around India's neighborhood, some of the things that have happened in the last few months have been quite dramatic. So I think to let people know that this is an important moment in regional and global politics. There are forces at work that will ensure that the certain changes that India wants to initiate do not happen. And I think for a leader of a country, this is important to to articulate for a large part of the population. And I think that's what as a leader of India he did. And I think to ensure that sense of pessimism does not allow India and Indians to become to go down that route, because let's remember that India remains one of the few countries in the world even today which is very optimistic about its future. If you look at the mapping, if you look at the data, it tells you that again and again people of India are very optimistic about their future, even as people in so-called developed world are extremely pessimistic. So I think it suits a leader of a nation like India to go at the ramparts of the Red Fort, and to rally the nation against the forces of pessimism. I think he should. We cannot find fault with that aspect from a leadership perspective.
Okay. Given in the light of the recent public outrage over that horrific incident rape and murder that took place in Kolkata, the Prime Minister spoke about the crimes against women and called for speedy, prompt investigations and strict punishments. Though he didn't make a direct reference to the Kolkata incident, but he in a way sort of voiced the outrage of the nation and said the message needs to be sent very clearly that the punishments have to be harsh so that they can be a deterrent.
I think that was a very important issue from a national perspective, what is happening at the moment and how furious people are and how agitated they are about the state of affairs. For a Prime Minister to speak on that, certainly I think it was timely intervention. And I think the intervention also becomes important because if you look at the record of Mr. Modi as a Prime Minister, he has always spoken for women's issues, for women's rights, for the safety of women, and this has been a consistent theme in his speeches, especially from the Red Fort. He has taken on some very difficult issues which no one used to talk about, like women's sanitation issues, for example. And he has been very categorical that as far as he's concerned, his legacy is concerned, it has to be seen in that context. So I think it was important for him not only to speak about it, but one also hopes that what he has spoken will be taken in terms of the policy response of the governments, and to the bottom level we will see some changes, because I think certainly there is a lot of angst among the citizenry about what has been happening repeatedly, and despite repeated condemnation of this, we have not seen a strong response from the state, whether they be state governments or whether they be governments across whether they be institutions across various states. So I think people wanted to hear that from the Prime Minister, and he spoke strongly about that issue, which was much required.
Absolutely, and that was the need of the hour, the message that the punishments should also be widely publicized, so that, as they say, justice not only needs to be done, but seems to be done. Thank you, Professor Pant, for joining me on the show tonight. Thank you. And still to come on DD India NewsHour, Turkish and Iraqi top diplomats hold critical talks in Ankara. North Korea to reopen for tourism in December this year after 5 years.
The World Wildlife Organization tells us that over 3 billion people across the globe rely on seafood. There are efforts being made to preserve our marine ecosystem. So let's dive right in.
The course of the river was getting shrinked in the upstream areas. And when there is no freshwater flow, the river Ichamoti only survives in the downstream areas, and it has become, in our terminology, we call it a tidal inlet.
Habitat from so many places.
You're watching DD India NewsHour. I'm Amritpal Singh. Both Ukraine and Russia have claimed successes against each other in the Kursk region. Russia claims to have captured several soldiers of the Ukrainian army, while Ukraine claims its forces are still advancing and that it has taken up a military commandant's office in the Kursk region. Russian Defense Minister says that additional measures are being planned to protect the border areas. On the other hand, amid the ongoing conflict, Britain, US and Sweden reiterated their support for Ukraine.
Amid the ongoing conflict, a show of solidarity from the Western allies continues for Ukraine. Britain's Ministry of Defense on Thursday said that British weapons can be used by Ukrainian forces in operations on the Russian territory. However, restrictions on the use of long-range Storm Shadow missiles remain. While Swedish Defense Minister said that Ukraine has the right to defend itself both inside and outside its territory.
I can state that Ukraine has the right to defend itself inside and outside its territory, and we have called on Ukraine naturally to use this platform and system in line with international law.
In an interview with the MSNBC, White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said that US will provide additional security packages for Ukraine in the coming days. On the battleground, claims and counterclaims both from Russia and Ukraine continued on Thursday.
We are talking first of all about increasing the efficiency of the troop command and control system in interaction with other law enforcement agencies and the administration of the Belgorod region, about identifying responsible officials as well as allocating additional forces and means that will be sent to carry out the main tasks.
Russia's defense ministry released a video on Wednesday showing a group of Ukrainian soldiers taken prisoner in the Kursk region. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the Ukrainian prisoners of war belong to the 80th and 82nd Air Assault Brigades of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Russia also claimed that its forces had taken control of a village in eastern Ukraine that is just 16 kilometers from the important city of Pokrovsk. While Ukraine's top commander said on Thursday that Kiev had set up a military commandant's office in the occupied part of Russia's Kursk region, where he said his forces were still advancing. The Ukrainian commander also claimed that Ukrainian forces had taken 82 settlements under control. Last week, thousands of Ukrainian soldiers smashed through the Russian border in a surprise attack. The attack prompted Moscow to evacuate almost 200,000 people while it rushed in reserves. Bureau Report, DD India.
And for more on that story, DD India's Dasha Chernyshova joins us from Moscow. Dasha, Russia has claimed that they had claimed earlier that they had been able to contain the Ukrainian offensive in Kursk. They insist they're taking soldiers into custody, but Ukraine today claimed that it's still advancing. What are you hearing about the real situation on the battleground?
Well, we understand that the fighting is still ongoing more than 1 week into this Ukrainian incursion into the Russian sovereign territory. The Russian MOD has been saying that they have been repelling the Ukrainian attacks. They also say that they have regained control over the settlement of Krupets. This is in the Kursk region. We also have heard that the Russian Kursk authorities have decided that more people will have to be evacuated. The mandatory evacuation has been announced in the the Glushkovsky district of the Kursk region, and people are being taken out from the region, with some of the representatives of the charities saying that it is the psychological help that is paramount for those who have been relocated. We also understand that the federal level emergency situation has been declared in the Belgorod region, which neighbors Kursk region and also which borders Ukraine. The situation there has been very tense, and the local authorities say that in the border areas it has been even more tense than ever, because Belgorod region has been under the repeated Ukrainian shelling. But over the past week, obviously this has increased. We also have heard that the Russian Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov, has chaired the Coordinating Council for the Military Security of Border Regions. This is the new body that has just been established to ensure the swift coordination of the military effort to squeeze the Ukrainian troops out of the Russian territory.
Okay. And what are the counteroffensive measures Russia is likely to take in the coming days, Tasha?
Well, to this moment, we understand that all means have been introduced to regain control over the Russian territories. This means artillery, tanks, drones have been in use. The Russian MOD has been repeatedly showing how it was using aviation to strike the Ukrainian positions within the Russian territory to destroy the manpower as well as the military equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces. We also understand that the Russian Ministry of Defense has said they are not taking the troops out from other directions in Ukraine. And this is also important. The Russian officials have previously been saying that one of the goals of Ukraine was to make Moscow move some of the troops from the Donbas area to the Kursk region. That was one of the goals of this incursion. So Moscow insists now that this was not the case. So in the upcoming days, we understand that the Russian actions will continue. Moscow has taken a very staunch position here, saying that it will make sure that the Russian regions are free from the Ukrainian troops.
All right, Dasha Ternishova, thank you very much for joining us from Moscow and giving us that update. And let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Turkish and Iraqi officials met for high-level discussions in Ankara to develop cooperation on security issues. The neighbors have in recent years been at loggerheads over Ankara's cross-border military operations against the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party militants based in northern Iraq's mountainous region. In an interesting development, North Korea has decided to resume international tourism to its northeastern city of Samgyeong in December. There is a possibility that it will be extended to the rest of the country, the Beijing-based Koryo Tour has reported. The move is a sign that the reclusive country is ready to reopen borders to bigger groups of foreign tourists after years of strict COVID border controls. The frankincense raisin, once valued more than gold, remains a key part of the Yemeni culture, navigating their presence from religious rituals to bustling markets. For centuries, Wadi Dokhas trees in dry lands of the Fofa province have produced the frankincense resin, powering trade routes that reached beyond the Arabian Peninsula. Today, frankincense remains an important aspect of Oman's culture and a living tradition. On the 78th Independence Day, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare invited farmers from across the nation for a special two-day program honoring the heroes of the field. These farmers included beneficiaries from the central government schemes such as PM Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, PM Fasal Bima Yojana and FPO representatives. Minister of Agriculture Shivraj Singh Chauhan launched the National Pest Surveillance System. This digital initiative utilizes cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning to offer timely and precise pest management advisories. The system comprises of a user-friendly mobile app and a web portal, ensuring accessibility for all farmers. By leveraging the real-time data and advanced analytics, NPSS enables accurate post-identification monitoring and management.
मिलके हम ऐसा एटमॉस्फेयर बनाएंगे, ऐसी व्यवस्थाएं मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में बन रही है और चल रही है जो पहले कभी नहीं थी, और जहां बेहतर करने की जरूरत होगी बनाएंगे, और आपकी जिंदगी कैसे बेहतर बने, क्योंकि आप लोगों को जिंदगी देने वाले हैं अन्य के माध्यम से, आपकी और जिंदगी कैसे बेहतर हो, सुखी और समृद्ध हो, उसमें कोई कसर नहीं छोड़ेंगे।
बीमा योजना से जुड़े हैं और 2016 से इस योजना का लाभ उठा रहे हैं। अभी तक जो इस योजना के अंतर्गत हमारे परिवार ने कम से कम रिस्क कवर में 5 लाख से अधिक हमको रिस्क कवर मिला है और बहुत अच्छी स्कीम है। मैं इस स्कीम के लिए माननीय मोदी जी और हमारे यशस्वी जो यहाँ पे कृषि मंत्री जी आए थे उनका भी धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगी।
Ines Shivalik arrived at Guam in the United States for an operational turnaround on the completion of the multinational maritime exercise RIMPAC 2024. The visit is part of the operational deployment of Indian Navy's Eastern Fleet to the South China Sea and the Pacific Ocean. The World Health Organization has declared that the Mpox outbreak in Africa is a public health emergency of international concern after viral infection in the Democratic Republic of Congo spread to neighboring countries in Africa. The declaration was announced by WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. It serves as a warning to other countries about the potential spread of the disease and calls for coordinated international response. DD India's Chris Okamrenga reports from Kinshasa.
The declaration of Mpox as a global health emergency was made by a team of international experts following the rise in cases of the disease in the Democratic Republic of Congo and other African countries. More than 100 cases of a new strain of Mpox that was detected in eastern DRC have been reported in Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda. The strain, known as Clade 1b, is reported to be deadlier than the one that spread globally in 2022. It has caused more than 500 deaths on the African continent so far. International experts are warning of the further spread of the disease across the globe. The Mpox virus is transmitted to humans through contact with infected people or animals. Common symptoms include skin rash, fever and back pain. The World Health Organization has declared the disease, formerly known as monkeypox, as a global health emergency to mobilize resources and coordinate an international response to prevent it from spreading. Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa, reporting for DD India.
A new round of Gaza ceasefire negotiations began in Doha involving officials from Israel, Qatar, the United States and Egypt. Although international and domestic pressure have built up on both sides to agree for a ceasefire, but it would be too early to predict about its outcome as Hamas has voiced skepticism about the chances of the talks delivering real results. Hamas is not participating in this. Take a look at this report.
Families of Israeli hostages and other demonstrators protested outside the headquarters of Netanyahu's Likud party in Tel Aviv on Thursday, calling for an immediate deal as Israel-Gaza ceasefire talks resume in Doha. Officials from Israel, Qatar, the US and Egypt are taking part in this negotiation. Protesters urge the government to secure a deal before it's too late.
My name is Zahiro Shachar Mor. I'm the nephew of Abraham Munder, got abducted from his house in Nir Oz on October 7th. He's 79 years old. My auntie, my cousin, and their grandson were also abducted. They were released in the first phase of the hostage deal. We need another hostage deal.
Palestinians in Gaza's Khan Yunis also expressed their wishes that mediators meeting in Qatar would reach a ceasefire deal.
I wish from those meetings today in Qatar to look at us with mercy and to expedite the ceasefire, because we cannot endure more than this. We got tired from this situation, we cannot endure it anymore, and we cannot live. We die 1,000 deaths every day. Honestly, I wish for a ceasefire today before tomorrow.
Meanwhile, Pope Francis prayed for peace and called for ceasefire on all fronts, for the release of hostages and for aid to the exhausted population in Gaza.
Continuo a seguire con preoccupazione.
I encourage everyone to make every effort so that the conflict does not widen and to pursue the path of negotiation so that this tragedy will end soon. Let us not forget, war is defeat.
Che si liberino gli ostaggi.
The talks, an effort to end 10 months of fighting in the Palestinian enclave and bring 115 Israeli and foreign hostages home, were put together as Iran appeared on the point of retaliating against Israel following the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31st. Bureau Report, DD India.
And for more on that story, DD India's Sarah Coates joins us from Tel Aviv. Sarah, Hamas is not attending the talks in Qatar. How much of a chance does diplomacy then stand to diffuse the tension or bring about the ceasefire deal?
Well, the White House is really trying to downplay this, saying that in other previous rounds of talks that Hamas wasn't actually at the table, that this was more indirect, saying that there is a presence of Hamas at these negotiations. Now, we did hear from the group in the lead up to these talks saying that there's no point negotiating just to negotiate, also saying that they want to meet with mediators on the sidelines of these talks. That's if the Israelis and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can actually present a reasonable deal. But there's certainly not a lot of optimism here on the ground in Israel, just given there have been so many rounds of hostage and ceasefire talks, only one of them really bearing any fruit. That was back in November. So really what we're seeing here are these same sticking points that we've been seeing time and time again. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, has been very adamant that there will be no end to the war, even if there is a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire of, say, some 6 weeks, that he wants to send troops back in and continue fighting in Gaza. And this is something that Hamas says is completely unacceptable and something that it will not agree to. So really only time will tell if these two warring parties can come to some sort of an agreement with the help of these key mediators. We're talking here CIA Director Bill Burns, the Qatari Prime Minister as well, and then there is the Egyptian spy chief. While on the Israeli side, Israel has sent a delegation of the Mossad director, also with the director of the Shin Bet. So many high-profile people there trying to push through this deal. And we are hearing reports that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, he's somewhat softened his stance, but his goals remain the same. And this is defeating Hamas to ensure that it never poses a threat to Israel again.
Okay, yeah, that's easier said than done. They've learned through 10 months they couldn't decimate. So when Benjamin Netanyahu, Sarah, takes a public position that he will not cease fire until he completely decimates Hamas, do you think his spy chiefs, both of the head of the Shin Bet and of Mossad, will be taking a more flexible approach behind closed doors for, say, a possible exchange of hostages?
Well, that is yet to be seen. We do, of course, know that the Prime Minister and the Mossad and the Shin Bet, they all held a very tight-knit meeting late last night ahead of their departure to Qatar. Obviously, we're not privy to what went on in those closed-door discussions, but in saying that, we do need to remember the immense amount of pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu is under. We're not just talking about from the international community here for him to end this war, given that the death toll has just gone up in Gaza to 40,000 people. That's according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. But he's also under a lot of pressure from the far-right wing of his coalition, and these are the ones that don't want to see a deal. They've been threatening Netanyahu that if he makes what they're calling an irresponsible deal with Hamas, then they will walk away from the government, see his coalition collapse, and Benjamin Netanyahu would be out unless someone else like Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, stepped in, as he's been promising to do. But then we need to also think about what's been going on the Israeli street. There are still more than 100 Israeli hostages being held in the Gaza Strip. Their family members are desperate. They are furious. They protested early this morning in Jerusalem and at a number of other locations, like right here in Tel Aviv. Before all of this kicked off, they are calling on Netanyahu to do a deal now, saying that this is basically the last chance that they may have to see their loved ones alive. But in saying that, Israeli police actually arrested some 4 of these demonstrators. So really, this is a country in turmoil, a region in turmoil. And in saying all of this, it's vital, really, that this ceasefire does come into play, especially given the current threat that Iran is posing to hit Israel for the retaliation of Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas's Politburo, which it blames on Israel.
Okay. Sarah, if these talks don't yield anything, they are not able to diffuse the tensions, are we back to what the tensions of Iran hitting, I was talking to you 2 days back while you were talking, Tel Aviv was being hit by rockets from Gaza. So the tensions are back?
There's been tension now for 10 months. I don't think anyone can really say that if there is a ceasefire that Iran won't hit Israel. There are reports now that Iran is beginning to calibrate its attack on Israel, certainly remaining very, very tight-lipped. So certainly anything can happen at any time. Just over the last hour or so, some municipalities in Israel's north, these are largely evacuated communities, they've actually been telling their residents to stay extremely close to shelter. There's been a real uptick of this cross-border tit-for-tat violence between Israel and Hezbollah throughout the day. Many, many rockets and drones flown over, shot over from southern Lebanon into Israeli territory over the last few hours, some of these sparking huge fires in areas like Kiryat Shimona. So this is really, once again, a region on edge, and this is why we've seen this accelerated deployment of so much US military hardware. We're talking here allied ships as well sitting out in the Mediterranean, and also this nuclear-powered submarine, with the Pentagon actually making that rare statement just a few days ago. So all of these signs really point to just how serious the situation is. And if indeed a ceasefire doesn't come into play, which is certainly something that may calm the situation, that's not to say that Iran will not still hit Israel.
All right. Sarah Coates, thank you very much for joining us from Tel Aviv and giving us that update. You're watching DD India NewsHour. Time now for some news on sport. After Independence Day celebration, Prime Minister Modi met with Indian Olympic contingent at his residence. Over 117 Indian athletes took part in the Paris Olympics. India bagged 6 medals with 1 silver and 5 bronze. Prime Minister Modi said that every player who went to Paris is a champion. The government will continue to support sports and ensure that top quality sporting infrastructure is built. As I said, India won 6 medals at the Paris Games. And the Indian athletes who took part in the Paris Olympics 2024 attended the Independence Day celebrations at the Red Fort in New Delhi this morning. The athletes included the Indian men's hockey team, who bagged consecutive bronze medals at the Olympics. Double bronze medalist shooter Manu Bhaker was also in attendance at the Independence Day celebrations at the Red Fort in New Delhi. The Board of Cricket Control in India has rejected the International Cricket Council's offer to host Women's 2020 World Cup this year. In case there is a change of venue due to political turmoil in Bangladesh, the Women's 2020 World Cup 24 is scheduled to be played in Bangladesh in September-October. The ICC is now exploring potential options to relocate the tournament if the situation in the host country continues to remain volatile. BCCI Secretary Jay Shah said that he has turned down ICC's offer to host the tournament. 10 teams are to participate in the tournament, which will be divided equally into 2 groups of 5 each. And before we close the show, a beautiful time-lapse shot of a flower carpet being made on the Brussels historic square in front of the City Hall. A long trail of flowers were laid outside the famous square on Thursday as part of the 23rd edition of the cultural event flower carpet. And that's it then in this edition of DD India NewsHour. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Amritpal Singh from my entire team here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India NewsHour.